Hey guys, what's up? It's Eric with Advanced Level Automotive. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're over here at the shop checking out this 2010 Toyota 4Runner. It's got the V6 engine. Customer complaint is that the alternator is not charging. Now the shop actually replaced the alternator, but even after replacing the alternator, it's still not charging. So they called us out to come look at it. Let's go ahead and get started. All right guys, so first things first, let's go ahead and verify the complaint. I'm gonna go ahead and start the vehicle up. Key on. It cranks, it starts. Now let's go ahead and move under the hood and let's check our reading. All right, so we've got the jump pack connected because the battery is completely dead, but we also have the power probe connected to the battery. So we can check the charging system voltage just by pushing this button here. As you guys can see, we're only charging at 12 volts. That means it's basically running off of the jump pack and the battery alone. Brand new alternator installed. You guys can see right there. That is a brand new alternator. We have the belt, everything intact. Everything is connected. Our terminal is connected. The plug is connected. But this thing is not charging. Now a side note, the technician already checked the 140 amp fuse that's in the system here. As you can see, the fuse is still intact. It's still good. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure out what's up with this alternator. So the first check I like to do is go directly to the alternator and go to the battery post on the alternator. You can see there's a little cover, plastic cover on there. I'm gonna pop it off. Well, this plastic cover is kind of difficult to pop off, but if you look right there where the plastic cover is, they give you a little opening. I think I can stick the tip of the power probe into that hole right there and get contact with the terminal. All right, so I'm just gonna take the tip of the power probe and slide it into that slot right there. And as you guys can see, we have 12 volts outputted directly from the alternator. Let me zoom in on that. You guys see that, 12 volts? So we know directly out of the alternator, we're not getting a charge. And what that is a voltage drop test from this point at the battery to the point right there at the alternator. We know that the wiring between here and there is good. So next up, let's go ahead and go to the connector at the back of the alternator and let's check to see if we have everything that we need in order for this alternator to charge. All right guys, so before we go ahead and disconnect the connector at the alternator, I want to take a minute to take a look at the wiring diagram and see if we can figure out what it is we need to be looking for. So first of all, let's go ahead and identify the battery cable that goes from the positive battery terminal to the alternator. If you look right down here, you'll see this letter B. That's going to be the B post at the alternator. I'm going to highlight this cable, and if we follow it up, you'll see that it goes to the fuse box, and that's where you will find the 140 amp alternator fuse. Now this fuse, we've already checked it. We know it's good. So I'm going to follow this back through the fuse box, and if you follow it down, you'll see that it goes to the positive battery terminal. So now that we know that this is the cable that goes from the battery to the alternator, we can assume that the rest of these wires on this wiring diagram that go to this alternator are on that 4-pin connector. So if you look over here, you'll see pin number 1 labeled as S. Then over here, you'll see pin number 2 labeled IG. Then over here, pin number 4 labeled L. Pin number 3 labeled M. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at each of these 4 wires, and we want to see what it is we should be seeing here with the ignition on or with the ignition off. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this pin number 1, which is the S terminal. And if we follow it up, you'll see that it's a violet wire or a purple wire, and it actually turns into a green wire. So it looks like this wire is 2 different colors, but if we follow it up, you'll see that it goes to the fuse box in the engine room. We know that because it says it here on the side, engine room assembly, left side of engine compartment. So inside of that fuse box, you'll find this alternator S fuse, 7.5 amp fuse. Then if we follow it back up through here, you'll see that it connects or it goes through the other fuse box under the hood. And then you'll see it attaches itself where the alternator fuse is. Now this is actually before the alternator fuse, so this is a direct feed from the battery. So again, if you follow this from the positive battery terminal, you'll see that it goes into the fuse box here. Then it comes over here. It goes through this fuse box, through this 7.5 amp alternator fuse. Then it goes through this green wire. Then it goes through this violet or purple wire, and it winds up at this S terminal, pin number 1.
So again, looking at this, we know that this is going to be a voltage at all times. And the reason we know that is because it's a direct connection to the battery. So it doesn't matter whether the key is on or off. This should always have 12 volts here. Now, if we take a look at this gray wire here, you'll see it's labeled IG, pin number 2, and this is a gray wire. Now, IG, I'm assuming, is going to be for ignition, which generally means that this is only going to be a power source during the time the key is in the on position. So if we follow this gray wire up, you'll see that it goes to the driver's side junction box, which is a fuse box inside the vehicle. And if we follow it up, you'll see that it comes from this ignition 1 fuse, which is a 7.5 amp fuse. Now the important thing to note is that up here at the top, it tells us that this fuse is only hot in on or start. So the key has to be on in order for there to be power going through this gray wire. So that's another thing we're going to need to check. We're going to go to this connector, check here. We should only have power here with the ignition on. Now, if we move over to pin number 4, again, you'll see it's designated as L. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. This is a pink wire. Now, if we follow that pink wire up, you'll see that it actually goes to the combination meter, which is the instrument cluster. And inside of that instrument cluster, we have the charge indicator lamp. This is the battery light that's on inside of the instrument panel. So if you follow this here, it goes through some type of little processor here. And there's a diode in the circuit. Well, this is actually an LED, I believe. So we have this LED diode and then this diode here. But if we follow it out, you'll see that it gets its power from this gauge fuse, which is a 7.5 amp fuse, also located in the driver's side junction box, which is a fuse box inside. Something I wanted to add, and this is just speaking from experience, I've run into a problem before where a bad fuse here or a bad light not allowing the power to get to the alternator on this L terminal here can cause the alternator not to charge. Now, I know it doesn't seem like it's really important because this circuit is only for the light bulb that's in the instrument cluster, but on some designs, there needs to be a power source or a power feed going through that light bulb reaching the alternator in order for this alternator to begin charging. So I don't know if that's the case here. I just figured that was something I should throw in there. And to be honest, guys, I didn't even take the time to look and see if the battery light was on in the instrument cluster. So that's probably something that we should do before we dig too deep into this. But anyway, if we move over here to pin number 3, you'll see it labeled as M. Now I'm going to highlight this up. This is the 4.0 liter. So we'll highlight this here. Then as you can see, it goes through this splice here where it splices over to, looks like the AC amplifier in the center of the dash. And if we follow it up, you'll see that it goes to the ECM. Now the engine control module in this case, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that this alternator regulator is controlled by the ECM. So what I would assume that we should have here is some type of duty cycle signal or some type of square wave. That's what I would be looking for. So this one we're going to have to check with the lab scope. Now when we check it, I'm not really worried about what the duty cycle is. I just want to see that we have some type of activity. Some type of activity here is going to indicate that the ECM is controlling the alternator and that we don't have a continuity problem between the ECM and the alternator. So if we go here to this connector, we're going to need to hook up a lab scope and we're just going to look for some type of signal. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you guys are following along. Let's go ahead and move back to the vehicle and do our checks.
Okay guys, so moving back over to the vehicle. If you look down here, I went ahead and I disconnected the connector at the alternator. Try to get you guys a visual. I know it's kind of dark down here. Okay, so we have our connector down here. As you can see, it's a 4-pin connector. We have our purple wire. That's going to be a battery power feed at all times. We have the gray wire, which is going to be an ignition power source. We have the blue wire, which is going to be the control wire from the computer. And we have the pink wire, and that pink wire is going to be for the charging light inside of the instrument cluster. So before I do any back probing, I think the first thing I want to do is go ahead and reconnect this connector. And I want to check to see if the charging system light is actually coming on in the instrument cluster, because I didn't actually check that to begin with. So that could be a dead giveaway. Let me go ahead and plug this thing back in. Okay, so we are plugged back in. Let's go ahead and move inside the vehicle, start it back up, and let's see if we have a charging system indicator light. Got the key right here. Ignition on. Let's go ahead and crank it and start it. And pay attention over here, guys. I think this is where the battery light was, but I don't see it illuminated. Let me cycle the key again. See if you see that battery light. Nope. Wait. Where is the battery light? Okay, yeah, I actually don't see a battery light at all. Let me see if I can take a closer look. Sometimes you'll be able to see the imprint. Where's it at? I think I see the imprint. It's right there. Can you guys see that? I don't know if that's going to show up on camera, but you'll see the imprint for the airbag right there. And I think that's the imprint for the battery light, but it's not coming on during the bulb check. Turn the key off, turn the key on. As you can see, we don't have a light during the bulb check. So this is a clue that we probably need to attack the fuse for this light bulb in the instrument panel. Let's go ahead and move back under the hood and let's check that. Okay guys, so according to the wiring diagram, the fuse box that houses the fuse that we're looking for the instrument panel is actually located right here on the driver's side. Now, if you take a look at what's going on here, you'll see that there's a bunch of wiring everywhere. And the reason for that is because the customer, I believe, recently had some type of alarm installed or some type of remote start system. And this is actually how they brought the vehicle in. So I'm not really sure what's all going on here. We have this box right here, some fuses, and you can see they tapped into all of this wiring here. We have some exposed wiring here. So I'm really not sure what this jumbled up mess is. Again, they brought it in like this because I believe they thought this had something to do with the fact that the alternator was not charging. I'm not really sure. I mean, it is possible that whatever is happening could be because of whatever's going on here. Again, they've got all kinds of stuff tapped into the wiring. Over here, you see they have a tap. And I'm not really sure what any of this stuff is. To be honest with you guys, I'm not too familiar with these alarm systems. But anyway, let me show you guys where the fuse box is located. It's right here. If you look underneath, you'll see that we have our fuses, and it had this little lid on there. Let me show you guys the lid. So if you look at the lid, you'll see you can find our gauge fuse. Where are you? Right over here, you'll see it says 7.5 amp gauge. That's going to be the third one down, which is going to be this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take the power probe, and I'm going to touch both sides of this fuse. But before I do that, I need to turn the ignition on. So let me go ahead and do that. Turn the key on. Let's go ahead and move back under here. I'm going to touch both sides of this fuse. We have power there. Touch the other side. And we have power there. So we know we have a good fuse. Next up, let's go over to the connector at the alternator and see if we have power there. Okay, so moving back under the hood. Let me show you guys. I have the connector disconnected down here. And let's see if I can show you guys. I am back probed on the pink wire. So you can see I have my back probe installed there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and touch the tip of that back probe with my power probe. And we are going to see if we have power getting to this alternator connector. I'm gonna go ahead and touch it. Now the ignition is on. Let's see if we got power. Okay, so as you guys can see, I'm showing about 10 volts there, but seems to be kind of a weak voltage because normally if we have a strong voltage, we should be able to get a chime or a beep out of this power probe. But as you can see, I'm not getting a chime or a beep out of this thing. Let me make sure I have a good connection. Okay, so I'm double checking my connection here. As you can see, I went ahead and I front probed the connector just to be sure I had a good connection with my back probe there. And as you can see, I'm still showing about 10 volts, but we're not getting a chime out of this power probe. Now, the neat thing about the power probe is that because it is always constantly connected to the battery, what it's doing is it's always doing a voltage drop test against the battery. So it's comparing the voltage at the battery versus the tip of the power probe. So if the power probe sees that there's more than like a volt of a difference between the battery and whatever it is you're trying to measure, it's not going to chime. It's going to give you a voltage reading, which in this case we have about 10.7 volts, but like I said, it's just not going to chime, versus if I were to take the power probe, excuse me, let me grab it. How did you get stuck? Oh man, let me dig you out. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So versus us touching that pin, let me touch this terminal here. As you can see, we have 12 volts and we have a chime coming from the power probe. And that's what we should have directly here, because that's what we got when we checked it at the fuse in the fuse box. So we know that there's high resistance in the circuit between here and there. Now, whether or not that's causing our charging system problem, I'm not really sure. I think that while we're here, we should probably go ahead and check the other ignition power feed, which is going to be the gray wire. We go ahead and pull this back out. I'm gonna go ahead and move the back probe over to the gray wire, and we're gonna see if we have an ignition voltage feed. Okay, so I'm front probed on this gray wire here. If I can show you guys, let me try to zoom in. You guys see that? I'm front probed on the connector. I just want to make sure I got a good connection. Don't worry, because the pin on this probe is really no thicker than the pin in the alternator, so I know it's not going to damage the connector. But I'm going to take my power probe and I'm going to stick the tip of it into this probe here. Okay, so I've got the power probe here. I'm going to go ahead and stick the tip into the back probe. And as you guys can see, we have a chime, but that's actually a ground. You see how it says 0 voltage and it's got a green LED lit up? So we actually are showing a ground on this gray wire, which should be an ignition power feed. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move over to the purple wire, which should be a direct power feed from the battery. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide the probe into there. Okay, so I'm probed on the purple wire now. Again, this should be a battery power feed at all times. So I'm gonna go ahead and touch the tip of it. Okay, as you guys can see, we have a strong battery voltage power feed, 12.1 volts. So we know that we have good continuity to that purple wire. Again, what we're worried about now is going to be the gray wire, which is supposed to be an ignition power source, and the fact that this pink wire seems to have high resistance in the circuit there. Okay guys, so a quick check I wanted to do before moving any forward is I have the power probe connected to the pink wire on the connector. Right down here, as you can see, I'm probed again on the pink wire at the connector. And what I want to do is I want to verify whether or not it may be normal to see this 10.6 volts on the circuit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have somebody push the ground actuator. So we're going to give this thing a ground, and then I'm going to move inside the vehicle and I'm going to see if the light comes on in the instrument panel. So let's go ahead and move inside. The light should be right about here. Go ahead and hit it, ground it. Yep, you can see our light bulb is coming on, let off. Okay, so again, the reason I think it may be normal is because the light bulb in here may be some type of diode. I don't know what it does, but it may drop the resistance of that power feed from the fuse through the bulb out to the alternator. So it may be normal to see what we're seeing on that end. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to focus on the gray wire, which is the ignition power source. So let's go ahead and move over to that fuse. Okay, so moving back inside the vehicle, the fuse that we're looking for, once again, is located inside of this junction box here, underneath the dash. Now, this time the fuse that we're looking for is going to be this ignition 1 fuse, 7.5 amp fuse. And if we look down here, it's located right there in between these two 10 amp fuses. So once again, I'm going to take the power probe and I'm going to touch both of the terminals. We're going to see if this fuse is any good. You see we got nothing there. Touch the other side and we got nothing there. Okay, Well, I wasn't expecting that. We should have at least a power feed on one side, but we don't have a power on either side of this fuse. Again, let me check it. Yep, we don't have a power on either side of this fuse, so maybe we need to move back to the wiring diagram and try to figure out where the power feed for that comes from. But before I do that, let me go ahead and pull this fuse out just to see if it's blown. Okay, so I've got these pliers. I'm gonna go ahead and try to pull this fuse out like that. Take a look at the fuse, and this fuse actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. So that fuse is good. Let me go ahead and stick it back into the hole here. And let's go ahead and move back to the wiring diagram. All right, guys, so moving back over to the wiring diagram. Again, what we're going to be focused on is going to be this ignition power source at the alternator, this pin number 2, the gray wire. Again, when we checked this at the alternator, we did not find that we had any power here with the ignition on. And when we checked the fuse in the fuse box, this ignition 1 fuse, we didn't have power on either side of this fuse. So what we're going to need to do next is try to figure out where the power source that feeds this fuse box or feeds this ignition 1 fuse comes from. So if you look at the top of the diagram here, it says hot in on or start. This diagram is not giving us the full layout of where the power source comes from that feeds this ignition 1 fuse. So in order to find that, we're going to have to move over to the power distribution wiring diagram. Now, before we do that, there is something that I want to address, which is something that kind of threw me for a loop earlier. This pink wire, which is the power feed on pin number 4 at the alternator for the charge indicator light or for the battery light that's in the instrument cluster. Again, when we checked this at the alternator, we only saw around 10.5 volts, something like that. And when we checked the fuse, we saw that we had full system voltage, 12 volts. And so we were concerned about that initially, or at least I was. But looking closer at this wiring diagram, again, you can see that this light bulb here and this power feed, it actually goes through some type of processor, some type of CPU unit before it gets outputted to the LED light bulb that's in the instrument cluster. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of voltage drop or voltage regulation that's happening here. So that's the reason why we only see somewhere around 10 volts on this wire. Anyways, like I said, that just kind of threw me off. I just wanted to address that, make sure there's no confusion. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and move over to the power distribution diagram. All right, guys, so we're looking at the wiring diagram for the power distribution. Now this diagram is spread across 6 different pages, but don't feel overwhelmed. This is actually pretty simple, and I'm going to do my best to try to explain it in the lamest terms possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by locating our ignition number 1 fuse, and it's right here on page number 5. You can see 7.5 amp ignition 1 fuse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on this page number 5. What that's going to do is it's going to kind of lay it out in a way that we can see this page for page. So this is page number 5. I'm going to go ahead and click to the right. This is page number 6. If I click to the left, it goes back to page number 5. So let's go ahead and start with this ignition number 1 fuse. And what we want to do is we want to find out where the power feed that feeds this fuse is coming from. So let's go ahead and start back tracing it. If we follow it down this way and we follow it up, you'll see that this actually feeds some other fuses here. Now we're not going to focus too much on that. We're going to continue to follow this power feed back, and you'll see that it comes from this ignition number 1 relay. But the important thing to note here is that this relay must be in the closed position, which means this relay has to be energized in order for the switch to close, in order for there to be current flow across this relay. So again, we're following this from the fuse up, out to the relay, ignition number 1 relay, and then we're just going to imagine that this is closed. We're going to follow this back through the relay, then we're going to follow it this way, and as you can see, this actually splices off and feeds several other different relays. But what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on this and follow it up and out of the fuse box. You'll see that it comes out on this black wire here. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this on page number 4. And you can see we're on page number 4. Our black wire is up here at the top. This is a continuation. It's just kind of running across the screen here at the top. We're going right across page number 4 over to page number 3. Again, you can see our black wire at the top. It's just going right over page number 3. It's going to go over to page number 2. And again, same thing here. Page number 2, we're going right across the top.
Finally, we get to page number 1. You can see the continuation of our black wire. If we follow it back this way, you'll see that it comes from the battery. So this comes directly from the positive battery terminal, but it has to travel through this 140 amp alternator fuse. Now, this fuse, you guys might remember, we already checked it. In fact, the mechanic who originally was looking at this already checked this fuse and verified that this fuse is good. So we know that we don't have a problem here. Again, this battery power feed comes directly from the battery, goes through the alternator fuse, goes up through here, out through this black wire. Again, page number 2, page number 3, page number 4, and finally page number 5. So our black wire is our power feed that goes into this fuse box. And again, this power feed gets spread out across several different relays. But the one we're concentrated on is going to be this ignition number 1 relay that feeds our ignition number 1 fuse. Now, as far as our next step, we could go back to the vehicle and we could check this ignition number 1 relay. But like I said, the important thing about this is that this relay has to be energized in order for the switch to close to allow the power feed to reach our ignition 1 fuse. So what I want to do is I want to take a moment to concentrate on the control side of this relay, this coil winding here. Again, with any control side of the relay, you're going to have 2 pins. One is going to be the power feed to the coil winding, and the other one's going to be a ground. So if we follow it out this way, you'll see that this is spliced together with some other relays, and this is going to be a shared ground between all of these relays. So if we follow it out this way, you see this little squiggly line, that means there's a continuation. So we're going to go to the next page, page number 6. We're going to follow our continuation down here. You see our squiggly line. We're going to follow it up and out of the fuse box. And as you can see, this goes directly to a chassis or a body ground. So this is going to be a ground at all times. Now if we go back to page number 5, where our ignition 1 relay is, this is our control side again. This is going to be the power feed side. Now I can follow this back, but just to make it easier to understand, I'm going to trace the power feed directly from its source. So going back to this black wire here at the top, again, this black wire is coming directly from the battery through the 140 amp alternator fuse. It's going into this fuse box. And as you can see, this little dot here indicates that it is a splice. So this power feed is being spliced off to several different relays, and also this AM1 fuse. So if you look here, the 7.5 amp fuse is the AM1 fuse. I can zoom in a little bit there so we can see it. Sorry, it's kind of difficult to read. 7.5 amp AM1 fuse. So again, our power comes in through here, gets spliced over through this 7.5 amp AM1 fuse. Then it comes out on this green wire here. Now, when it comes out on this green wire, it continues on to the previous page. You can see right here, page 4. We're just going to follow it right across the page over to page number 3. And when we get to page number 3, you'll see this green wire comes directly or goes to the ignition switch. So you'll see right here it says AM1. This green wire goes to the ignition switch, and when the ignition switch is in the closed position or in the ignition position, it's going to send the power feed from that AM1 fuse through this switch and out through this purple or violet wire. So we're going to follow this violet wire again to the next page, which is page number 4. You'll see it travels right across page number 4 over to page number 5. And when it comes to page number 5, we follow it down over here. You can see it goes into the fuse box. And this is really important because what this does is it powers up the control side of our ignition number 1 relay. And in fact, while we're here, you can see that this also supplies power for the control side of this ignition number 2 relay and also this ignition number 3 relay. So you can see things that are powered by these relays. Like for instance, if we look at relay number 2 here, you can see WIP. I believe that's the wiper. Let me zoom in a little bit there. All right, so WIP fuse, washer fuse. So that's the wiper fuse and the washer fuse. Then also the 4-wheel drive, KDSS. I'm not sure what that is. But if you look at those things, you'll see that they also can't get their power feed without our power source coming in on this purple wire, which again gets its power from this 7.5 amp AM1 fuse. Now, as far as what our next step should be, I mean, we can go back to the vehicle and check this relay here, make sure that it's working. You know, we could probably put a relay jumper on it and try to see if we can power up this fuse. But like I said, guys, this relay is not going to work without the control side. So I think it's also an important step to maybe go back and check this AM1 fuse. Now, the only other thing that I would like to add is that, you know, if this fuse is blown, I mean, looking at the number of different components that are powered up by this fuse, you know, such as the wiper blade and the washer, you know, you would think that none of that stuff is working. So, I mean, it's possible that we have some components on the vehicle that are not working, or accessories on the vehicle that are not working. But to be honest, guys, I didn't even take the time to check to see what was working inside the vehicle and what wasn't. So, I mean, I'd be interested in going back into the vehicle and double checking to see if the wiper blades work and to see if the washer works, and then maybe to see if any of this other stuff works, because if this fuse is blown, again, we're not going to have the power feed coming through the ignition switch on this purple wire. And you can see this purple wire also splices off back this way. We can see what else it feeds. It looks like it feeds the power management control ECU. So I wonder how that could be affected. Anyways, guys, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you're following along. Now let's move back over to the vehicle, locate this AM1 fuse, and let's check it out. Okay, guys, so moving back over to the vehicle. What I wanted to do real quick before I go to checking the fuse is I just wanted to check to see what is and what isn't working. Again, if you guys recall, according to the wiring diagram, if we have a problem with the power feed on that circuit, we're gonna have a lot of stuff that's not working. So I guess the first thing we can do is check the wiper blade. So I'm gonna go ahead and move the wiper blade switch. See if any of this stuff is working. And as you guys can see, the wiper blades are not working. Okay, so that's a clue. Check out this AC. It's not even powering up. Yep, blower switch, none of this is working. So that's another dead giveaway. The radio, it's not powering on, so there's another clue. Let me check the headlights here. Well, it looks like the headlights did come on. Let me see if the turn signals work. You guys can see our turn signals are not working. So, okay, yeah, that's something that they didn't mention to me, is that we have some stuff inside the vehicle that's not working. This might have been some good information or useful information to have before we started. But anyway, let's go ahead and move down here and let's check that fuse. Okay, so according to the wiring diagram, the fuse that we're looking for, the AM1 fuse, is located in this fuse box here as well. So I've got the lid. Let's take a look at it. Our AM1 fuse, I see it right there. This 7.5 amp fuse in the middle. It's going to be the third one down. So if we look down here, it's going to be this one right here, the third one down. Let me go ahead and take the power probe. I'm going to touch both sides of it and let's see what we got. Okay, so I'm going to touch this side of the fuse here. You guys can see we don't have any power. We're actually showing a ground. Let's check the other side of the fuse. As you guys can see, we have power on that side of the fuse. So that fuse is definitely blown. Let me go ahead and pull it out with these pliers. Take a look at it. See if we can get a visual. Oh yeah, that fuse is blown. I don't know how well that's showing up on the camera, but yeah, this fuse is blown. Let me go ahead and get a replacement fuse, stick it in there, and let's see what happens. Okay, so I've got a replacement fuse right here, 7.5 amp. Let's go ahead and stick it into the slot. Get this thing in there, right there. Okay, let's go ahead and see if anything inside is working. So I've got the key. Let's go ahead, turn the ignition on. You guys see our battery light? Right there. Okay. AC just came on. I don't know if you guys can hear the blower. Radio's coming on. Looks like everything here is working now. Let's go ahead and start this thing up. All right, engine is running. Let me see if the wiper blades are working. Yep, there we go. Let's go ahead and move back under the hood.
And let me grab the power probe. Let's go ahead and check to see if our charging system is working. So again, we're connected to the battery. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the rocker switch. And we have 13.6 volts. We are now charging. The alternator is working. You guys can see everything is back to normal. Now the question is, why did that fuse blow? Does it have anything to do with all of this stuff underneath? I really think so. I'm pretty sure there might be a short to ground somewhere here. Again, if we look over here, this is going to be the ignition switch. You can see all of the wires connected to the ignition switch, and they have all of this stuff tapped in. And here they actually cut this red wire, and if you can see, they kind of wired this thing in series with it. So this is the other half of the red wire. This should be attached to here. They looped it back around. I think they looped it through the box that they have down here. And again, like I said, I'm pretty sure whatever's happening has something to do with whatever's going on down here. As you can see, they have this wire, just a bare wire, and it's not really running to anything. I'm not really sure what this was for. It's just kind of laying there. Just gonna kind of look around here. I see this orange wire. Oh yeah, so there's more open wire down here. You can see this green wire. They opened it up and they attached this orange wire here. And again, it's not going to anything, so I'm not really sure what this was for. And if we move back over here to the box, you can see where they tapped into this here. They tapped into this. And we have just a jumbled mess of this wiring. So I really think the fix is going to be removing this alarm system, or this remote start system, whatever it is. That's not going to be my job. I don't know. I just see potential areas for a lot of short to grounds that could be causing that AM1 fuse to blow. Again, I'm not going to worry about that. That's going to be the shop's problem. They're going to have to charge the customer to rip this stuff out, or maybe try to insulate some of this wiring. Other than that, everything is back up and running. That's a fix, guys. So just because I know some of you won't be satisfied with the ending of this video, let me just give you a quick rundown. Now the thing is that I'm done here. I really don't want to go any further, because, or not too much, because the customer actually doesn't want to pay any more money for doing anything else. They just wanted the thing running. So at this point, whatever I'm showing is just to show you guys. So again, the AM1 fuse was blown, and we know that that green wire for the AM1 fuse comes from the ignition switch. And I went ahead and I located it on the ignition switch. Again, this is a connector here, and pin number 2 is going to be this green wire right here. So somewhere along the line, this green wire is shorted. If we follow this green wire down through here, it actually goes into the harness. So let me try to show you guys this wire. I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera, but this wire here, it feeds into the harness, and then it disappears into this main bulk harness here. Now it comes up on the other end at the fuse box here. I believe it's this wire right here, and as you can see, they have something tapped into it. Now we do have some electrical tape here, and I don't know. Oh yeah, see, we have a little bit of an exposed wire. Looks like they might have wrapped a piece of wire around this green wire, and then they taped, or they tapped into it here. And if you follow this white wire down, you know, it's possible we could have a short in this white wire wherever it's going. But when I follow this white wire, it just goes off into this harness right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. It goes into this harness and then it disappears. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Check this out. There's another kind of bare wire here. I mean, this one, I don't know if it has anything to do with what we're dealing with, but I'm just seeing a lot of bare wires here. Anyways, we have a short to ground somewhere on that AM1 circuit, which is that green wire. I don't know where, but really the fix would be just to remove everything and put everything back to factory and fix all of the open wiring, because again, like I said, that wiring could be touching any of this metal here on the airbag or on this bracket, anywhere, and that's what could be causing the fuse to blow. And so yeah, that's where we're at. Anyways guys, at this point I'm gonna end off the video. Like I always say, I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it informational. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.